Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I'll tell you about a homeowners association that wants to park on my land. I was dead asleep when the angry song of my phone tore the night open. The screen burned my eyes with a time that was oddly specific and somehow accusatory. 3:27 a.m. I never get calls at 3:27 a.m. unless something is on fire or someone's in trouble, so I flailed for it with the clumsy hands of someone who had exactly 3 hours of shut-eye and zero patience. The name lighting the screen was one of those "I don't want to deal with this" names. The number the community uses for urgent HOA matters. I answered with the kind of hushed, gravelly voice you reserve for hospitals and nightmares. "Hello? Good morning," said a too-bright voice that sounded like it had been practiced in a mirror. "This is Morella from the Compliance Committee. We need your gate keys. Right now." I sat up in the unfamiliar hotel bed and smacked my elbow on the nightstand. I was out of town, visiting my sister and then dropping in on a client, and my brain was fighting to catch up. I stared at the rain massaging the window like it was trying to knead me back to sleep. "My gate keys?" I echoed. "At 3 in the morning?" "Yes," she said, as if this were a perfectly normal hour to rearrange the world. "We need to park the HOA truck under your carport." "You what?" "Park the truck in your yard," she repeated with the patient tone of someone explaining the alphabet to a stubborn child. "Because Kendra's husband got home early from a flight, and we can't leave the truck out in this rain. He's already almost at the gate. The windshield wipers on the HOA truck are acting up and the bed has supplies that shouldn't get wet. Just open your side gate, we'll roll it in. Quick." Kendra is the HOA president. Her husband, Rhett, lives 2 doors down from me and wears the smugness of a man who has never stood in a long line. The truck they were rattling on about is the community maintenance truck, white with fading vinyl letters and 2 ladder racks that rattle like maracas. It's supposed to live in the maintenance bay by the clubhouse, not under my roof. "I'm not even home," I said, because that was the truth and also one of the few sentences my sleepy neurons could assemble. "I'm in another city tonight." "Then drive back," Morella said without missing a beat. "It's only a couple of hours. You can be here before 4. It's raining hard and the truck needs to be under a carport. Yours is close. We already checked the map." I should have laughed. Instead, because my heartbeat was now a marching band, I went very calm. "No." Silence, then incredulous. "No?" "Correct. No, it's my private property. The gate is locked. You don't have my permission to enter. There's nothing in our covenants that gives the HOA the right to demand access to my yard in the middle of the night to store a truck." "Kendra is saying it's a community emergency," Morella insisted, in a tone that tried to wear authority like a too-big jacket. "Rhett got home earlier than scheduled. He's soaked. The truck is full of tools and paint for tomorrow's fence project. We cannot have it in the rain." I sat up straighter, cradling the phone. "Let me restate. I am not home. I'm not going to wake up, put on soaked jeans, and drive across counties in a storm so the HOA president's husband can keep the community truck dry under my carport. Even if I were home, the answer would be no." "You're being very uncooperative," Morella said with the brittle tone of someone unused to hearing the word no. "We can fine you for non-cooperation in emergencies." Now I did laugh. The sound surprised even me. "There's no emergency here that involves my yard. If the truck is in danger, it should be parked in the maintenance bay like always, or under the clubhouse overhang, or in the board president's driveway, or in the neighbor's carport, or you can put a tarp over it. You cannot force entry onto my property. If you try, I will call the police, and the very best thing that will happen tonight is you will get a trespass warning." "We'll remember this," Morella said with a sharp little huff. "The board will be informed. Kendra is not going to like this." "I'm sure she won't," I said, now fully awake and distinctly past the grace I offer normal people. "But I am sure she will like it less if you set foot in my yard without my permission. Good night." I ended the call before she could reply and just sat there in the dim hotel room, watching rain crawl down the window like the sky was crying on a timer. My phone buzzed immediately again, but this time it was a text. A photo of that lumpy white maintenance truck at the community gate, headlights staring into the wet like disappointed eyes. Then, right after, another text with far less patience. "Open your gate now." RR, of course, being Rhett, the HOA boss's husband and my neighbor with a thing for cutting corners. I typed back, "I'm not home. Do not enter my property. Use the maintenance bay." There was no response for a minute, then another number popped up. Kendra. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail and immediately my phone spit up a notification. "This is Kendra," she began with that clipped, cheerful tone that lives halfway between customer service and a principal's office. "We have a situation. Rhett brought the HOA truck back early because of the storm. You know he travels for work, the flight got in early and he needs to get home. The parking bay is full because of the overflow from the fence project. We need your carport. The bylaws allow us to act in the community's interest. If you're not home, you need to get home. This is not a difficult request, and your refusal will be recorded. It might be important to know that our HOA is not a disaster. It's a sleepy, modest community where folks argue about basketball hoops in the shade of mulch. We have a pool that's always slightly too cold, and a clubhouse that smells like laminated flyers. I've owned my little house for a few years. It's 2 bedrooms, 1 carport, and 1 tiny backyard that I've turned into a sanctuary with a raised bed garden, trellis lights, and a bench that knows the exact shape of my tired. My side gate is kept locked because I like my own boundaries, and because last year a contractor, hired by the HOA, wandered through without telling me, used my hose, and left it running. After that, I added a camera and a better padlock. It wasn't drama, it was just me being careful. Careful was about to level up. I called the non-emergency police line for our city because if someone even hinted at stepping on my yard without permission at 3:27 a.m., I wanted a record. The dispatcher was all efficient warmth. I explained the situation carefully and made sure I stuck to facts. "Ma'am," I said, "there's a homeowners association truck outside my neighborhood. The HOA president and a board member are demanding that I unlock my gate so they can put the truck under my carport. I am not home. I've expressly denied permission for anyone to enter my yard. They're threatening fines and hinting they'll enter anyway. Do you want an officer to respond?" she asked. "If they set foot on my property, yes," I said. "It's private. I don't have a tenant or a house sitter. My cameras are live. If I get a motion alert, I will call back. For now, I just want it noted." We documented. I hung up. A minute later, my phone pinged with a motion alert. I tapped to view, and my little backyard sprang to life on the screen. Sheets of rain, the soft chain of lights under the eaves, the gate shaking with the gusts. The lock looked like a dark eye. I watched, waiting for it to blink. Nothing but weather. Another ping, this time from the front camera. Headlights slowing, then stopping, then, nope. The truck kept moving. The HOA truck rolled down the street past my house, the camera catching a streak of white and the reflection of rain across its hood. It stopped in front of my driveway for a hot second. The beaded, dark silhouette of someone sat in the passenger seat. The truck's brake lights flared. Then it pulled off, and the camera's world went quiet again. I messaged my friend and neighbor Luce, who keeps weird hours because she works early shifts at a hospital and waters her orchids at 2 in the morning. "Do you see a white HOA truck hovering like a ghost?" She typed back almost immediately. "It rolled by. Looked like Rhett driving. He slows like he owns every driveway. We good?" I told her about the calls. She typed several things that would get flagged by a school filter and then, "Want me to slide your garbage can tighter across the gate? It's not foolproof, but it would be obnoxious to move in the rain." Bless her soul. "Yes, please," I typed. "Thanks." She sent a photo exactly 47 seconds later. My gate with the garbage can slotted snugly in front of it. Half a brick stacked on the lid. A garden gnome on guard like a cheerful sentinel. If nothing else, it made me smile. "You owe me a croissant," she texted. "Also, your camera is catching my bad hair." While I was still smiling, my voicemail chirped again. Another message from Kendra. Clipped. Less cheerful. "This is escalating and it does not have to. You are making a simple request into a difficult situation. The truck will be undercover for an hour at most. If you do not assist the board, we will take appropriate action." I let out a long breath to see if anything calming was left in my lungs. There wasn't. I opened my email and started documenting. I don't know if everyone keeps a HOA nonsense folder, but I do. And it has threads about hedge trimming schedules and a memo about paint colors that reads like a philosophical treatise. I wrote a short summary of what happened, with times and direct quotes as best as I could recall. Then I wrote an email to the board address. It was polite but firm, and it included the sentence, "Any attempt to enter my yard without my permission is trespass under state law, and I will respond accordingly." Before sending, I included something else. Without getting into identifying details, the place I live has a one-party consent law for recordings. I turned that on in my brain as a setting like you'd switch on your car's fog lights. I told them I would be recording any further calls for accuracy, and that if they needed to reach me, they could do so in writing. I hit send, put my phone face down on the table, and tried to will myself back to sleep. The rain outside my hotel window softened from drumming to a soft hiss. like the storm was shushing itself. My body, apparently, was not going to get the memo about resting. After 20 minutes of staring at the ceiling, I gave up and turned the phone over again. Another motion alert, front camera, the HOA truck again, this time slower, wipers doing a sad metronome. It paused at my driveway. Then someone climbed out on the passenger side and jogged up my path, hood up, shoulders hunched against the rain. The figure leaned in close to my front door, then cupped hands to peer at the side gate as if eyes alone could unlock it. The camera caught a momentary slice of the face in the light that leaks from the porch fixture. It was Rhett. He shook the side gate like it had insulted his family, then tried the lock. Finding it stubbornly real, he pulled his phone out, banged it on his palm, and stepped back into the rain. The mics on those little cameras are not built for weather lectures, but they do pick up enough to make out tone, if not exact words. I heard him say something sharp and entitled. He tilted his head like he could argue with a deadbolt. I called the non-emergency line again. "It's me," I said to the same dispatcher. Somehow, hearing her voice again felt like having a teammate. "The HOA truck is at my house. The board president's husband is attempting to access my side gate. I have not given permission. Can you send an officer? I want a trespass warning issued." She took the details with that calm that dispatchers must inhale like medicine. "An officer will be en route," she said. "If you have a way to communicate with the person there, you can let them know officers are on the way." "I'll do that," I said and texted Rhett. The message was just, "I called the police. Leave my property." A stream of bubbles appeared, popped, appeared again, then nothing sent. Moments later, the camera showed him hustling back to the truck. The truck pulled off, brake lights red through the rain, and rolled toward the clubhouse end of the street. If you've ever watched someone back down after getting caught, you know the choreography. Head movements sharper, door slammed a little too hard, like the air had offended him. The truck paused at the stop sign with the posture of a sulky kid called out in gym class. Then it turned and disappeared. The officer called my cell a few minutes later, introduced himself, and asked me to tell him what happened. I walked him through it in a voice that was steadier now that the immediate annoyance was simmering into resolve. He said he'd swing through, check the gate and the door, and document an attempted entry. He explained that because no one physically crossed onto my yard, he was reading my front camera timestamps to match, it would be treated as a warning this time. He left his card number on my voicemail and told me to call if anyone came back. I slept for 2 hours after that, which is not a lot, but somehow was enough to pack my bones back into their spots. In the morning, coffee in a paper cup, I played the feeds again on my phone and took screenshots. I added them to the same email thread with a quick note. For the record, I did contact law enforcement. Going forward, please put any requests in writing. I sent a short, fact-only note to a group text of neighbors who watch the slow-moving soap opera of this community like it's a weekly show. Luce responded with a picture of my garbage can blockade and wrote, "I want naming rights. Call it the Luce line." By mid-morning, my personal inbox chimed with a notice of violation. Subject line, non-cooperation with board request, emergency. The body had that hours-old coffee smell of a rushed letter. It took the tone of a scolding aunt, chiding me for failing to assist the board in the execution of its duties in an emergent weather situation, and obstructing access to common property adjacent to my lot. It threatened a fine. It referred to an obscure paragraph in the covenants like a magic spell. It CC'd the property manager used by the board, an off-site admin who is, to be charitable, a little hands-off. I read it twice, then 3 times slower. There is a strange peace that comes when you realize the people trying to bully you have misread the same rules they're waving around like a sword. The paragraph they cited? It was about common areas during emergencies and the board's right to make reasonable temporary use of common property. My carport is not common property. My gate is not common property. My yard is not common property. The paragraph even defined common property, like the bylaws themselves were grinning at me and whispering, "Not this." I wrote back, using the formal language that always makes me think of slow, patient rain. I deny that any emergency required entry onto my property. Even if there had been an emergency, the covenants you cite specifically limit the board's emergency powers to common areas. Please rescind this violation notice. Also, please schedule a hearing as provided in our governing documents, because I too know how to use the tools you are using. Then, because I am determined but not naive, I sent a certified letter to the board's mailing address, summarizing the events, the law about trespass in our state, And the fact that our state requires notice and an owner's consent before a board can enter an owner's separate interest, absent true emergencies like a gas leak or fire. Nothing like, "The truck is wet." I copied the property manager. I also copied myself, because paper trails are like life jackets. Lucrezia from the hospital kept the community chat updated. Officer cruised our loop around 4. I told him I was the garbage can accomplice. He laughed like this is not the weirdest thing he's seen tonight. He looked at your gate, he took a photo. He also drove by the clubhouse. Guess where the HOA truck is now? Yep, under the clubhouse awning like we all told them to do. At lunchtime, while my client showed me a pile of reports and we pretended neither of us was exhausted, my phone lit up with a call from a number I half recognized. It was the property manager, Bennett. He has that voice like a tired coach who wants the season to end. And I almost felt sorry for him because he's perpetually stuck between an overreaching board and homeowners with boundaries. "I received your email," he said, "and the violation copy. I have to tell you up front, I don't set these policies. I'm the messenger. But, off the record, I agree that this was not board business." "Off the record is still words that exist," I said, a little kinder than I felt, because Bennett always answers calls, and that deserves some kindness. "I need it on the record. The notice needs to be rescinded. I want it in writing, and I want it acknowledged that any entry to my property without permission will be treated as trespass." He sighed in a way that sounded like a paper bag collapsing. "I'll talk to the board," he said. "There's a hearing next week for some other matters. I'll put this on the agenda. There are people who believe meetings solve things. There are also people who understand that meetings are where problems are dressed in costumes and taught to dance. I'd been to enough of these gatherings to know which part of the show I was buying a ticket for. But I also knew how to prepare, so I did. I wrote a timeline, I pulled the screenshots into a document and labeled them, down to the minute, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that specificity is the oxygen of accountability. I printed the relevant sections of our covenants and highlighted them with the vigor of a late-night study session. I also called a friend who is a paralegal, not because I wanted a legal slap fight, but because I wanted to say everything in a way that made sense if it needed to make sense to someone in a tie later. She reminded me to stay factual, leave out adjectives, and let the board either do the right thing or make a mess in front of witnesses. And witnesses I had. People talk. Our cul-de-sac has a woman named Cricket who misses nothing but pretends she does, and a retired teacher named Saul who writes letters to the board with the clipped dignity of a literature professor and the cheerful threat of a beekeeper. They both reached out to say, without saying, that their patience was also increasingly allergic to nonsense. 2 days later, we had a deluge warning for the weekend. The timing was delicious. While a second storm marinated the city, the board wanted to argue that I had denied them shelter. The irony baked itself. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. It would be in the clubhouse meeting room that's too bright and too beige, with a long table and chairs that squeak when people say things they don't entirely trust. Before the hearing, Kendra sent out an email to the community reminding everyone of the importance of working together during emergencies, and I felt my jaw do that thing where it wanted to climb into the ceiling. That weekend, while Puddles practiced for a contest, I focused on my other life, clients, and a visit with my sister, who kept pushing home-cooked meals at me like she could stuff the stress down my throat until it turned into strength. It worked because that's what family does. It nudged the annoyance into something sharper, cleaner. I took a walk during a break in the rain and watched a storm drain swallow leaves, and thought about boundaries again. I thought about the quiet satisfaction of people who believe rules are for other people, suddenly realizing they are not exempt. I thought about the call at 3:27 a.m. and how entitlement always sounds so loud because it expects to be the only voice in the room. On Monday morning, I drove home. The streets glistened like they'd been polished. My little house greeted me the way it always does, with the warm familiarity of things you've loved by tending them. The garbage can still guarded the gate like a faithful thing. I moved it back to its proper spot with a pad on the lid. The padlock looked back at me, unbothered. I checked the cameras and marveled at how normal the footage looked when no one was trying to rearrange your life at ungodly hours. And as if on cue, because entitlement always doubles down, I found a handwritten note taped to my front door. The paper had soaked rain and dried again, warping into a wavy rectangle. The handwriting was bold and unfamiliar in the way of trying too hard. It read, "We are disappointed in your lack of community spirit. If more people acted like you, the neighborhood would suffer. Please reconsider how you want to be viewed here." There wasn't a signature, but the heavy scent of Kendra's tone was all over it. I took a photo, slipped the note into a plastic sleeve, and added it to the stack. I don't keep grudges, but I keep receipts. The hearing started exactly at 6 on Tuesday, which is the one thing our board does with precision. The 5 members sat behind a table with name placards and bottled water. Kendra in the middle, a smile placed on her face like a sticker. The vice president, a man named Galen, who looks like he was born to hold clipboards. Morella from the call. She wore a scarf that looked like it cost more than my entire wardrobe. 2 others who rarely speak but nod constantly as if nodding earns points. There were a handful of homeowners present, drawn by curiosity and the rumor mill that is stronger than any newsletter. The property manager, Bennett, sat to one side with his laptop, eyebrows already asking forgiveness for what he would have to witness. They read my violation, non-cooperation in an emergency. Then Kendra said with the bright smile of someone announcing a bake sale, "We're here to hear from me, who refused to allow the community truck to be stored under her carport in a storm. Do you have a statement?" "Yes," I said, standing with my folder like a contestant on a game show where the prize is common sense. I kept my voice flat. I received a phone call at 3:27 a.m. from a board member demanding my gate keys so the HOA could park the maintenance truck under my carport. I said no because I was not home. It was my private property, and there was no emergency. I was then told to drive back from another city in the rain to comply. When I refused, the board president's husband came to my house, tried my gate, and left when I told him I'd called the police. The truck was then parked under the clubhouse awning without incident. Here are the timestamps, the recordings, and the relevant covenants limiting board emergency powers to common areas. Please rescind the notice. I handed out copies like a patient teacher. Bennett scanned them with the relief of someone spotting dry land. Galen flipped immediately to the highlighted paragraph and froze. Kendra's smile wobbled. "The board has discretion to act for the good of the community," she said. "We had supplies in that truck that could have been damaged. The maintenance bay was available," I said. "It was full," she said. "Then the clubhouse overhang, as shown in the photos, was available," I said. "And it was used. The point is not where the truck eventually went. The point is that you attempted to access an owner's property without authorization in the middle of the night, and when told no, you sent your husband to try the gate." "Rhett is a resident," she said, chin tipping up. "He has as much right to ask as anyone." "He has the right to ask," I said. "He does not have the right to enter. He does not have the right to rattle my gate. The board does not have the right to demand my keys and order me to drive across counties in a storm so that you can use my carport. That is not what anyone agreed to in any set of documents." Morella's scarf wavered as she swallowed. "You could have simply helped," she said, voice softening into that syrupy tone that wants to drown you. "We're a community. I don't know why you want to make enemies." I looked at her with the mildness I keep for people who dress control as kindness. "I am very neighborly. I water plants when folks go on vacation and I move packages off porches. I will happily bring soup to anyone under the weather. I do not give out my house keys to be used at 3:27 a.m. for someone else's convenience." There was a murmur behind me, the audience doing what audiences do when this kind of scene plays out. Some of it was supportive. Some of it was just the noise of people recognizing a boundary they too wanted to keep. Bennett cleared his throat, pointed at the section I had highlighted and said, "The documents are clear that emergency powers are limited to common property. We're not talking about a burst water line in a unit. We're talking about a vehicle. It's my recommendation that this violation be rescinded." Kendra's smile dimmed. "Noted," she said in the tone of someone noting a mosquito. Galen, still frozen on the highlighted paragraph, nodded once, as if he had had an epiphany he didn't enjoy. The 2 quiet board members looked at each other like maybe they were hearing a language they vaguely understood. "Also," I said, because my grandma didn't raise me to forget the main part, "I want it on the record that if anyone enters my property without permission, I will call the police. The officer already issued a warning for attempted trespass. If it happens again, I'll request a report. I don't want to go down that road, but I will." The quiet board member on the left spoke up for the first time. "Did the officer say that?" he asked. "About a warning." "Yes," I said. "It's in the report. I'd be happy to provide you the file number." Kendra flicked her fingers, dismissing the reality she didn't prefer. "Let's move to board deliberation," she said. And they did the little huddle that boards do when they want to pretend decisions are made in silence. They whispered. They glanced at me. They whispered more. After what felt like an entire season of a show, Kendra said, We will rescind the violation. We remind the community that cooperation is essential. Meeting adjourned. That could have been the end. But the end would not have carried the necessary weight. An entitlement rarely bows to a single moment of reason. It has to be taught repeatedly, like a toddler who has just discovered the word mine. As people stood and shuffled out, a cluster of neighbors lingered. They wanted to tell me their own stories of overreach. Sul, the retired teacher, had a thin folder of his own documenting the time the board told him he needed to remove a wind chime because it wasn't on the approved list, and he showed them a page from the covenants that said nothing about chimes. Cricket winked conspiratorially and whispered that she'd once caught Rhett loading patio furniture into the HOA truck on a Saturday morning and then returning it Sunday night. She wondered out loud how much the truck is used for community business versus personal errands. Luce, smelling faintly of disinfectant and orchids, squeezed my shoulder and said, "You need anything for the next round, I'm in." The next round was not my idea, but it turned out to be my moment. Or rather, it turned out to be our moment. Because the way these things unfold is through 1,000 small discussions where people tentatively say, "Hey, is it just me?" It wasn't just me, and there were receipts. That night, with the storm making one last noisy exit and the streetlights throwing puddle light into weird, gorgeous shapes, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. Instances of overreach, I wrote at the top, like I was naming a play. I jotted down the 3:27 a.m. call, the demand to drive back from another city in a storm, the attempted gate entry, the bogus violation. Then I left space and added the things other people told me. The wind chime nonsense, the patio furniture shuttle, the time Cricket caught Kendra reserving the clubhouse for a board work session that looked suspiciously like a birthday party with a cake and a DJ. I added the meeting where rules were changed without quorum. I added the alley rumor that the maintenance bay was always full because it housed more than tools. It housed personal storage. I went to the county's public records site and pulled the HOA's annual filings. Boring? Absolutely. Instructive? Like a flashlight. Late filings, extensions, expenses that didn't add up. I highlighted, circled, layered sticky notes. I wasn't hunting scandal. Power doesn't need scandal to be rotten. It needs comfort. I wanted accountability. And as the list grew, I realized accountability had company. Democracy. State law where I live protects owners from boards working in the shadows. Meetings must be noticed, minutes kept, decisions ratified openly. Directors owe fiduciary duties, loyalty, and care. You can't use association assets for personal convenience or waive fines like flyers. There's a tool for directors who forget, recall. It isn't fun, but neither is being told to drive across counties at 3:27 a.m. so a truck can sleep under your carport. I printed the recall recipe: petition, percentage, special meeting, vote. Our bylaws didn't change the majority needed. Next morning, I knocked on Luce's door. "I think we should recall the president." She grinned. We started with conversations, then a flyer. "Do you feel heard?" And met. People came. Individually, small annoyances. Together, a clear pattern. We collected signatures. It felt like participating. We hit the threshold in 2 days. Bennett, the property manager, let hope cross his face when we turned in the petition. Kendra, the president, blasted an email accusing a small group of stirring up division, promising to maintain order. The special meeting was set for 3 weeks out. Then a curveball. The HOA filed a small claims case against me for damages from my non-cooperation. The amount was small. The message wasn't. Intimidate, isolate, deter. I chose malicious compliance. I gathered my timeline, screenshots, voicemail transcriptions, and the officer's card. Small claims loves receipts, not bluster. I also reinforced my boundary. Taller interior latch, weatherproof padlock, a discreet sign inside the gate. Private property. No entry without permission. The night before court, Rhett rolled the white maintenance truck into the neighborhood loaded with patio pavers and an outdoor kitchen box, backed into his driveway, and unloaded. Cricket documented and sent the photos to me and Bennett. I thought the truck wasn't for personal use. In court, the judge heard Kendra's storm and urgency speech. Then my timeline. 3:27 a.m. demand for gate keys. I was out of town. Threat of fines. Attempted gate. Police warning. Truck under the clubhouse overhang. Bogus violation. I handed up covenants showing emergency powers apply to common area, not my carport. Any damages? The judge asked. Receipts? None. He dismissed the claim, awarded me costs, and said, Associations have authority, not sovereignty. That afternoon, Bennett replied to Cricket's photos. Association truck is for association business only. No sign-out log for this time. Will be addressed. At the recall meeting, the room was full. Owners spoke about fiduciary duty and trust. Kendra warned of chaos. I said, "It isn't leadership to demand my keys at 3:27 a.m., threaten fines, sue without damages, or use association property for personal deliveries." We voted. The recall passed decisively for the president and secretary. The vice president took the gavel. "We need to earn trust. Let's draft emergency, vehicle use, and enforcement policies." Corrections followed. A public sign-out sheet appeared on the truck. My violation was rescinded, my costs reimbursed. Our committee wrote clear policies. No owner calls between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. unless there's an imminent threat to life or property. Emergencies defined. No storing association property on private lots without consent. Personal use of vehicles banned. Mileage logs required. Amenity suspensions for misuse. Police issued a formal trespass warning for my property. Rhett knocked later, hands up. "Neighbor to neighbor? Soup and plant watering, yes," I said. Commandeering my carport at 3:27 a.m., no. He left. Consequences settled in. Reimbursement for unlogged gas, loss of borrowed authority, and a shared understanding that boundaries hold. The audit confirmed our suspicions: personal truck use, off-book purchases, emergency as shortcut. The board adopted every recommendation and issued a censure with reimbursement. An envelope later revealed texts from the night of the call: "Make it an emergency," now filed for history, not revenge. Life returned to normal. Rain on my carport roof didn't spike my pulse. The lock looked boring. My phone stayed quiet at 3:27 a.m. The truck sat under the clubhouse overhang. Some victories are loud. This one is a lock clicking on a gate no one rattles, a community showing up with pens instead of pitchforks, and the calm of knowing you don't owe anyone a midnight drive in the rain. Friends, thank you. See you soon.